Black Writers, After Hours. Cheryl Martin is a unique voice in the arts landscape. She examines subjects that many people are afraid to talk about with humour, warmth and honesty. Cheryl's stellar reputation precedes her, and I was really curious to hear about her journey. I asked her to introduce us to Cheryl, the artist. This interview mentions mental health issues and suicide. If you want to avoid this content, please skip to 11 minutes 30.
Well, you can hear originally I was from the States, and I've been in and around Manchester since 1988. And I had a few degrees, university degrees. So when I started off writing, I actually started off writing when I was about 8 years old, like they say in the bio.
Yeah.
And my father sent off some of my poems when I was 16 years old to a lot of poetry magazines in the States. And some of them actually got published.
Wow.
And then when I was in uni in the States, I went to Williams College, which is in Williamstown, Massachusetts. And I did creative writing. And I think that I got I got shortlisted for some award or something. But I felt like when I got to Manchester that my writing was very page-based.
Okay.
So it was like a real page poet.
Sure.
And I went around to a workshop, which just happened to be the old Identity workshop. Back when Lem Sisse was running it. It was around the corner from where I was living because I was going to uni again at Manchester University.
Sure.
And then I started, because they would go out as a group. We would go out as a group and we'd go to libraries and stuff and have these performances. And I began to realize I could choose the poems that were actually good because I would not read them out loud to anybody. And you have a whole list of poems in front of you and you thought they were good when you put them in the list. But when you actually come to open your mouth and read that poem, you realize, that's terrible. So I think that a lot of my development as an artist, as having a unique voice started then. Okay. And having a voice that sounded like me and actually reflected me and who I really am started then. And it was also through Common Word that I got my first commissions as a playwright. So I got my first commissions as a playwright with Pit Prop Theater, which no longer exists, but I was their writer in residence for 3 whole years.
Wow.
And they had to use everything I wrote because they couldn't afford to pay me and not use it. So that meant that I had to learn on the job how to make a play work with people who were willing to work with me. Okay. So I'd say those 2 things really got me started as an artist. Who I am now, it's much more difficult to say, but that DNA goes through everything I do, I think.
Right, okay. Amazing to hear your origins.
Yeah, the origin story. If I were a superhero, which I'm not quite, but I wish I were.
I mean, creative superhero. I'd attest to that.
Okay, that's kind of you.
So your work digs deep into the human psyche, particularly your poetry collection, Alaska. Published through Common Word. So how did it feel to publish Alaska? And
like I said, I started writing when I was 8, but the reason I started writing was because I already had a lot of mental health issues. By the time I was 8 years old, I was already suicidal. And surprise, surprise, my mother didn't really want to hear about that. Right. And, it made her very sad. And I realized that if I had told people what I was actually thinking, it made them sort of sad. Yeah. So I stopped telling them and I started writing it. And Alaska is sort of the result of that. Most of those poems are things that I can't say, but that I want to communicate, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, sure.
And how did it feel to have it published? The thing about when you publish a book of poetry, you're not looking in people's faces. You have no idea how they react to it. It's like you put it out there and it's a message, and you don't necessarily have to deal with people's reaction. You do when you do readings, but and I ended up I was going to turn them into a stage show.
Yeah.
One person show.
Yeah.
And I worked with Darren Pritchard, that a lot of people know because he's the house mother for almost all the Vogue houses in the Northwest. But when I laid all my poems out on the floor that I was thinking of using, and then Darren asked me what was the story behind what was going on in my life when I wrote that poem. And then he said, that's the actual show, not the poems. So there's only one poem from Alaska that's actually in the stage show Alaska.
Right, okay.
And what I found doing the stage show, which is much more about my life and sort of how I grew up with the mental health problems and what happened, and being hospitalized and attempting suicide and all that. And what I found doing the show is that after the show, there'd always be at least one person who would come up afterwards to say that I'm just like you, or my daughter is just like you.
Right.
And the ones who were just like me, I remember once a very young black woman whispered in my ear that I'm just like you, but I've never told anybody. And so that's why I kept doing that show for so long, was just for those people, because it was a bit of a rough show to do.
Sure.
And people would sometimes be crying during the show. I would always cry because I'm not an actor. So I was just simply reliving it all.
Wow.
And but in the end, I did that show with people were just in a circle all around me, and I didn't have any tech. I just had a boombox, and I was just telling them the stories.
Okay.
And so I could see when they were getting upset. So you could immediately ask them, are they okay, and do a little bit of help. And after the show, I would always talk to them, but I didn't realize what I should have had all that long time was like a mental health professional to be there, and somebody from Mind, anybody, because I'm the person who needs the professionals. I'm not the professional.
Sure.
So I learned, but doing that show and working with Unlimited, Unlimited give. They do big commissions and things for disabled writers, playwrights, performers. And I had a big commission from them at one point, just before lockdown. And doing that made me realize what kind of care I needed for myself and also for my audience. You know, what aftercare after a show like that really looks like.
Right, wow, yeah. So it sounds like a hugely different experience to when you published the collection.
Oh, when you published a book, it's like, it's so fun. I've got a book. I guess it's going to be in the, in the British Library or something where they put every book. I finally got a book in there, and I was really psyched. In fact, the only reason why it got published is I think I put on my Facebook, I really should have done a collection by now. And Pete Callow from Common Word saw it. And he messaged me and says, "We'll do your collection." And so, it was late. I mean, it was like 20 years or something after I'd started writing, and started doing like readings and stuff like that. Sure. So I was really happy I just felt happy to have that collection. And it was a beautiful book.
It is.
It's got a CD in it with like videos, and it's got beautiful illustrations. It's just so gorgeous, and of course I love it. But like I said, when you put it out there, the audience is not in your face.
Yes.
When you do a reading, when I do readings from that book, then that's a little, I am gauging how the audience feels about things. Yeah. And so you have to take them, like my theory of a reading and a play is like you start off light, because I can sing, I usually sing, that always makes people feel good. So you do a little bit of singing, you do some funny poems or something, and then you take them down the rabbit hole to where it's really deep and dark. But then you have to bring them back up again before you let them go, so that you don't leave people down there. You take them back up. And that's the way life really is anyway.
Choices not made here, lovers not taken. Your children were born in another universe. Chances you lost here, a face never touched. You never lied in another universe.
The other reason why I kept doing Alaska and talking about my own mental health is because, good God, in my 20s, oh, what a terrible time that was. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And the thing is, I know that there's other people going through that same nightmare, but I am now 63 and I'm still here. And I finally got decent, therapy as well. So I feel better, a lot better than I did in my 20s. And so they know that you can survive.
Yeah.
And thrive. You do not have to stay there and suffer.
Yeah. No, yeah. Very grateful that you shared, you went through that journey and got your writing out there. Yeah.
I was lucky.
You mentioned the singing, and you're yourself as a poet and a theatre maker. So you've been involved in the arts and in different art forms for quite a while. So do you have a preference for a particular medium?
I actually like singing the best.
Okay.
But that's why I decided I didn't want to make money from it.
Okay.
Because then it becomes how you pay your rent.
Sure,
and then there's all that pressure and you can't enjoy it anymore. Whereas now I can still enjoy my singing.
Yeah.
I do it for fun.
Yeah, okay, yeah, interesting. And yeah, it makes sense. So how did you first start off with your singing then?
Again, this is when I was little. I don't remember how I started, but I know oh my God. Okay, so I put this into one of my plays, my solo shows, was that I'm the oldest of 5. So I shared a room with my sister who's 4 years younger than me, who's lawyer sister. And that's Winnie, my sister who's a lawyer. And I can remember that I would be on the top bunk and I'd be listening to the radio and singing along, until quite late. And then I realized that Winnie must have had to listen to all that. Not until I was grown did I ever think, was I keeping my sister awake all those years? But that's how I learned how to sing.
Okay.
And then my father, who was a computer systems analyst in the 50s, and he had great musical taste. So he had all the bebop people. He had people like Monk and, John Coltrane, and he'd have Betty Carter and, all these great albums.
Yeah.
Nina Simone was my favorite. And I would listen, I would sing along to those as well. And to Billie Holiday. Yeah. So for Billie, you would listen and learn how to style a song.
Yeah.
Like how to make a song your own song. And for Ella, you would learn what the dots were, what was actually written, because Ella would always sing the real song first.
Yeah.
And then she'd start scatting.
So
that was really fun. But Nina Simone had this one really funny song, and it started off, Eve and Adam in the garden, everything was great. Then one day a voice said, pardon, miss, my name is Snake. And it was just such a fun, we loved that song when we were little. And it goes on, go on and eat forbidden fruit. It's quite a treat, forbidden fruit. It's mighty sweet, forbidden fruit. Go ahead and take it. You know you're gonna love it. Boom, boom. It was great. Those are the wrong words, but it's a long time since I heard that song.
So you were self-taught then?
Oh, very.
Okay.
But I did, I was brought up Catholic because my dad was Catholic, because his grandmother was Irish. And and so I sang in the church choir, but it was very Catholic choir. And it wasn't when I went to a Catholic girls' school for high school. And there was another choir, and they did gospel, and that's when I began to have more fun. But I can't read dots and sing. I played the flute, because my parents thought we all should learn an instrument.
Yes.
Mine was flute, so I can read dots and play the flute, but I can't read dots and sing.
Okay.
So I sing by ear.
Wow.
Heard you back on George Street. Do you hear the rain in the morning? Is it dancing through the broken window pane? Heard you back on George Street. Do you feel the pain in the evening? Are you wondering how your life got this way?
Cheryl, actually, it's funny because you were the first person to introduce me as a poet to somebody else, which was a really validating moment for myself. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So I wanted to ask you, when did you first feel validated as an artist?
Wow. I think it was when my dad sent out those poems when I was 16.
Oh, lovely.
And they actually got published.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a bit of a shock. I don't think I'd thought about, until then, I hadn't thought about sending my poems anywhere. So I guess my dad having that kind of, wanting to do that for me. And then they actually did get published,
Yeah.
so that made a big deal. That's
Wow.
probably it.
Brilliant. So you talked about joining Identity and being able to have that community and get that performing exposure. What advice would you give to people starting out now and wanting to establish themselves as a creative, I guess, in a slightly different kind of...
A very different
Yeah.
age, isn't it? So, I mean, back at the beginning, I would do things like go to pubs and set up an open mic night,
Yeah.
and everybody share what we got through the door. And I guess that don't wait for somebody else to validate you is one thing. Everybody, I think we should all get money, funding, because, that money is public money and we're part of the public.
Yeah.
And, so if you're an artist, you should, hopefully get proper funding. But before, don't wait for that to do your art. It's like, go ahead and, do it on a wing and a prayer or whatever you're going to do. If you're going to put on a play, I hate the idea of people not getting paid, but sometimes it's worthwhile just to have a go,
Yeah.
so that the people who can pay you get to see what your work is
Sure,
like.
sure,
Because
sure.
you might not get funding first time out.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, is like, don't wait for other people to validate you. Do your own stuff. Like, I set up Black Gold Arts with Darren Pritchett, whom I mentioned earlier. And Darren also directed Alaska for me and my next play, because he's a movement, choreographer.
Sure.
And as a spoken word person, I don't move enough, so I needed somebody who could make me look interesting on stage. But we started Black Gold Arts because we both had awards and stuff, but for some reason we were finding it difficult to get our stuff put on in Manchester. And so we decided, we borrowed £1,000 from Sustained Theatre up north, the Stun Studio,
Yep.
and we put on 4 shows. My show, there was a show by Keisha, I think, and by Chanje. And,
Thompson, Chanje Kunda, yeah.
And then there was also a sort of really great dance piece that Darren had done with lights and everything, with the interesting lighting. But anyway, we put that on and we called it a festival. And lo and behold, we had the British, the British Theatre Guide came to see it, and the Arts Council came to see it, and the British Council came to see it.
Yeah.
And then the next year we got 25,000 from the Arts Council to do a week-long extravaganza.
Okay.
And that whole thing was like, we just took the little bit of money, put it on, and that's where, and we're still going.
Yeah.
Like we did a 100,000 pound 2-day festival in 2022, and then we were just part of Eurovision. We were part of the Eurovision Eurocamp, cultural festival. So that all started because we were sick and tired of having to run around getting our stuff put on. So
waiting.
So my advice to people is like, start your own thing. Do your own thing, and then make it something that everybody else feels like they need to see. And just like have faith in yourself.
Yeah. Great, fantastic. I wanted to ask you, what's next? For you as a creative, as
Well, I've been saying forever, like I said forever, that I want to do a poetry collection. I've been saying forever I want to write a novel. And it's funny because that's the way identity has moved as well. All the poets are now writing novels. But I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I don't do it. And I've decided, like, I'm not going to wait for funding. I'm just going to start. I started a couple of weeks ago to actually start writing the ideas down. And I actually wrote the beginning. And then I realized how hard it is to write a novel. Oh, my God. It's so different. But, it's going to be hard. But I want to have a go.
Wonderful. Well, we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
With your novel writing.
Thank you.
And can't wait to read it. But thank you very much, Cheryl Martin, for being on Black Writers After Hours.
Thank you for having me. It was really lovely to talk.
This episode's prompt is, write a letter to yourself as a child or young adult. What would you tell yourself now that you wish you had known then? This is a Culture Word production. Thank you to our funders, The Space and Arts Council England. Recorded at Silver Lining Music Studio.